Hello and welcome to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse, stories of survival and hope after financial abuse in a marriage or romantic partnership. I'm your host, Lori G., and today I'm excited to welcome from the United Kingdom, domestic abuse advocate Claire Holcombe. Claire is currently service manager for the UK nonprofit organization Women's Aid Luton, who serves women of abuse throughout areas of Britain, providing shelter and emergency resources for women fleeing abuse. Claire is going to tell us about the Women's Aid organization and how it started as a small local resource until one day they got a secret visit from a princess. Claire, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Laurie, and thank you for inviting me to speak.
So, where in the world are you now, and where are you originally from?
Hi, so I'm in England right at this moment in a town called Luton, and I'm originally from England, even smaller town called Royston, where I was born and where I grew up. But I've lived in various places since then, but always in England.
At this time of year, what kind of weather are you having?
Well, it's our summer, so we should be having very hot, sunny weather. But today it's quite cloudy, but we have had a couple of heat waves this summer. And in England, we're never prepared for heat waves.
We always tend to think of London and England as this foggy, misty, mystical place.
No, not always.
Well, before we start talking about the organization that you work with and how it provides safety and empowerment for women in the UK, how did you get involved with this field of domestic violence, and how did your professional journey as an advocate start?
I had quite a strange journey because when I was at school, I always wanted to be an English teacher. So that was always, when I was growing up, that was always what I wanted to be and what I played with my friends, being an English teacher. And then that sort of changed. And then I wanted to be a journalist. But when I was originally working in sort of office type roles, I did some volunteer work at a big homeless hostel in London by one of our really big railway stations. And when I was volunteering, when I look back at it now, it was just a generic homeless drop-in for men and women. And in those days, because we're talking now back in the 80s, because I've been doing this a very long time, there was no risk assessments and we didn't know the history of any of the street homeless people that came in. And so it wasn't probably the safest place to work for an 18-year-old girl and to volunteer, but I absolutely loved it. And then I ended up actually moving into that field and deciding that that's where I wanted to take my career, to work with homeless people. While I was working there, I got an amazing opportunity and asked to get involved in an outreach project where doctors were going out to actually medicate and treat homeless people on the streets. So it was quite a big media thing at the time as well. It was on the evening news, on the television. So it was quite a privilege to be involved in that. And throughout your life, sometimes you meet people and you get turning points of what really changed your life. And one of the things that happened, they asked me to be on it because I knew a lot of the street homeless around the area of the hostel through outreach work and through them coming to stay at the hostel. So they thought I'd be a good person to introduce the doctors to them. When I was out there was one particular woman who I'd known through, she'd never actually stayed in the hostel, but I'd seen her on outreach and stuff and spoken to her and given her food and sort of built a little relationship with her. And I knew that she was a heroin user, injecting heroin user. And I knew she had an injecting site that was needed looking at. So I said to her, went running over to her when I saw her, said to her, "Oh, we've got a doctor here, he can come and treat you." And she said, "Oh no, Claire, don't worry about me, don't bother with me, let him treat someone that's more worthwhile." And all of a sudden I thought, women in any circumstances are always beneath everybody, and the vulnerability of homeless women. And then I decided that I was going to then concentrate on working with women rather than with women and men. And that's how my career progressed. So I was working with homeless women, which then in turn led me to work with women. A lot of homeless women were involved in drug use, which then involved me to working with a lot of women who were involved in sex work. So that's how my career worker. So for many years, I worked with women who sold sex in the street, while as a frontline worker and managing some extremely amazing services. And then whilst I was doing that, I got involved in a research project with a local council that I was working with, looking at why women became chaotic. Because I had such long-term relationships with a group of women who were selling sex in the street, they asked me to be the researcher, and we did it over a year. And one of the things that really stuck in my mind was that all those women had experienced domestic abuse as a child or as a woman in their own relationships. And when I thought back about it, I thought all the sex workers that I've worked with had experienced domestic abuse in some form or another. So it had been an adverse experience for them. So when I decided to step away from that for lots of different reasons, because it's quite a difficult job to do.
Oh, sure.
It can have a huge impact on you. I actually decided to maybe work in domestic abuse and look at doing some preventative work for these women. So that's how I ended up at Women's Aid, where I am now, and I work, and it's a refuge provision service. So that is a very small part of what I've done, because I've done many, many other things as well during that time. I've worked with the government on domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. I've worked with the police. I've done lots and lots of stuff. I think that would be a whole new podcast on its own.
So you don't come, it sounds like, from a domestic abuse background yourself. You developed a passion for this as a teenager, which is unusual.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I just hate injustice of any type. And I think I have just realised so much how women haven't had a voice over the years. And it's not being able to have a voice that has allowed the systems, because it's not just individuals that abuse us as women, it's systems as well. And I've always been privileged to be able to be a voice in all sorts of places for women. And I am so passionate about this that every job I take, I say this will be the last one, and then I'm going to go and work in a supermarket, and I never do.
Well, how and when did Women's Aid form, and what is its primary function as a public service to women in the UK?
So Women's Aid in Luton, we're a small charity, but we're a mighty charity, and it's actually been around for 50 years, which is positive that this charity has weathered all the storms and all the different governments and all the different political climates, because women's services are often the first services to go. So it's very positive. But the negative thing is that actually Women's Aid there is a need for it at all, that women and children are living in fear. So Women's Aid, we are primarily a refuge service. So we have 5 refuges that we run. And it's been around for 50 years. So how it started was that there was a group, it was when the feminism was really taking off in the 70s in England. And there was a lot of very proactive activist feminist groups. And violence against women was starting to be seen as something that needed to be dealt with, and that women were unable to leave abusive relationships because the systems weren't around them for housing and benefits. So here in Luton, there was a lady called Jenny, and she was a social worker, and she and a couple of other women got together and decided to start this charity up in Jenny's attic. And it was originally a helpline for women who were experiencing domestic abuse to ring and get advice and support. And they actually then raised quite a bit of money, and they managed to raise enough money to open a house for women to flee to, so they could leave where they were living, leave the abuser, and flee to stay somewhere safely. And it was actually the only second domestic abuse refuge to be opened in England. And the first one was in Chiswick, and this was the second one. And back in those days, in domestic abuse refuges, women were actually in sharing rooms and in dormitory-like rooms. So it was very different to how it is now. But they have gone from strength to strength. And then a few years later, in the 80s, Lady Di, who was married to Prince Charles, who's now king, came to visit the refuge on a secret visit, because obviously, you have to keep refuge addresses secret so that perpetrators and abusers are not able to find the women. And then Luton Borough Council sort of sat up and took notice then and said, oh, so refuges are a thing and that they're a good thing. And they started to support Women's Aid in Luton. So it had many ups and downs. And now, as I said before, we now run 5 refuges. 3 of them are generic refuges. One is a complex needs refuge for women women that have other issues as well as domestic abuse. That could be mental health, that could be drug and alcohol, that could be a disability. So they need that bit of extra support. And the other is a refuge for South Asian women, which is staffed by South Asian staff, because often the forms of abuse that they experience can be different with family abuse. And although South Asian women don't have to go in that refuge, they can choose to or not, whether they would prefer to. And we also run a helpline, which is for individual women to ring in to get any information and support that they need, and to access our refuge service, for professionals to make referrals, and for anyone basically to ring up if they want some information and knowledge about domestic abuse. And we've also got a children's worker, because we see children as being survivors in their own right of domestic abuse. And we support the women, these children as well, that are in our refuge in their journey around recovery from domestic abuse.
That brings up such an important issue. With the UK continuing to grow as a melting pot for such large numbers of incoming foreign nationals, what kinds of new challenges has that created in bringing domestic violence resources to women? How do you overcome those obstacles?
It's absolutely huge. So obviously we opened our specific South Asian Women's Refuge because we realised that South Asian women do have different needs, and other cultures do have different needs because there's different views to domestic abuse. Language is an issue. So in our South Asian Refuge, we do have workers that speak the languages that would be there. We try and get contacts out in the local community of people that speak particular languages or aware of cultures. We try and work with organisations that are aware of issues within different cultures. So what we do is we like to take the word out to those different communities that domestic abuse support is available, and then any support that they can give us, then we'll take that as well. So then we use a telephone service called Big Word, where they provide interpreters for us. And we use Google Translate as well. But we would never take a woman in who was saying that we couldn't support her because of her language. Because as a team, we love to break down barriers of women coming in, and we'll do whatever we can to support women. But our big issue is no recourse to public funds. So that is when women come into the country and they may come on a visa, they may come on a spousal visa with their husband, they may come in different ways into the country and not actually be at that moment eligible to no recourse to public funds. So obviously the numbers of this are rising, and it's something that's happening for all women's services. So if a woman has children, then most of the time social services will then take responsibility for that woman. There is government arrangements to be able to apply for them to be able to get their immigration status, and then there's a pot of money that is available for them whilst we do that. So if there's children, we would get a social services to support them financially in refuge to stay until we get everything sorted out for them. Unfortunately, there used to be a pot of money for single women to be able to do the same thing, but the government, a couple of years ago, they were going to stop that money completely, but they haven't put it up. So unfortunately, as a refuge, our costs go up every year. And I'm sure you're aware in England that we've had a huge cost of living crisis. So our bills and things have gone up. So we're a small charity. We don't have any backup money. So unfortunately, there's quite a few women, single women, who've got no recourse to public funds that we've not been able to accept in refuge.
And that's why they don't leave, because if they don't know if there's going to be resources out there, especially as you were saying, if you've got kids, once you're out that door from a very dangerous spouse and you find that those resources were thin after all, you are really in trouble.
And also for our staff as well, it's really difficult for staff because we all do this job because we want to support women. So you can imagine what it's like for staff when we have a woman that we have to say we can't help. So we are lobbying our local council, who gets the money down from central government for our services, we're giving them case histories and we're telling them exactly what the issues are, and hopefully they'll be able to ring fence us some money or get some money from the government. It's really difficult. I'm sure the political stuff that's going on around immigration and things in this country, it's a really difficult time at the moment. But realistically, that is women and children's lives and safety that we're talking about, and feel like you can put a price on that.
No. What I hear a lot in the States from organizations is that they have such difficulty providing a living wage to their advocates to keep people staffed. And much of these positions have to be professionally filled. And it's hard to get someone like that for barely a living wage.
I mean, looking at that from a bigger perspective, because that is an issue for us as well. I mean, there's no way that our staff get paid what they should get paid. But also, if you look at it as well, the majority of women that work in women's services, and in our women's service, we're a women-only service, it's women doing the work. That work is not valued. Again, it goes back to a patriarchal systems of not paying women the value of the job that they're doing when they're supporting other women. And I mean, I always say about my staff is that I don't even think they realise that every day they're saving women's lives.
And that takes money.
It is a very difficult situation all around. But when there's any cuts to be made, it's always women's services that get cut.
But we hear in the States that the UK is taking a lot more seriously aspects of domestic violence that we have not caught up with yet with the States. You had this recent law, I think it was called the Coercive Control Law, that offers more protections for victims of domestic abuse. What is that law? How does it work?
So coercion and control is a big part of domestic abuse, and it's been very difficult for professionals who aren't working in domestic abuse to understand what that means and what impact that has on the woman, and how that stops somebody leaving, stops somebody, all the myths that are around domestic abuse, around the victim's side of domestic abuse, coercion and control. But it's really difficult to prove that someone is coercing and controlling you. And also it's very difficult to understand if you've never experienced coercion and control. So as we know, coercion and control is completely taking someone's power to make decisions on their own. However you do that, you are coercing to control them to do what you want them to do and to not allow them to do what they want to do. So previously, it could be in domestic abuse cases that go to court. And I'd like to stress as well that in England, a lot of domestic abuse cases don't go to court for lots of different reasons. But when it does, it was sort of just part of domestic abuse in general, that you didn't have your freedom to do this or not do this. But now it's seen as something on their own. And it was almost like police or professionals wouldn't look at domestic abuse unless there was a physical wound. So you could report it as much as you liked, but until somebody actually physically hurt you and there was evidence of that you couldn't do anything about it, and there was no law and legislation around it. So all the stuff that goes around domestic abuse, as in coercion and control, now has to be recognised, even if you've never been physically hit or other forms of domestic abuse, that is still a form of abuse that's taking away your power and has as much impact on you as any other form of abuse.
Well, and financial abuse sure falls under that category.
And also we've added some others as well, which are really good. I'm not sure how you are in the States about that, but now stalking is seen as a form of domestic abuse on its own, as is non-fatal strangulation now seen a form of domestic abuse on its own. So what I mean by on its own is that it would always before be taken in domestic abuse. But now, if you are in an intimate relationship with someone or have been in an intimate relationship, you strangle them but not enough, you let go before they die, that on its own is a form of domestic abuse. If you are stalking someone in a relationship, not in a previous relationship or any connection, that is seen as a form of domestic abuse now as well. So you can report that on its own. And the majority of women that have experienced domestic abuse have experienced non-fatal strangulation.
And financial abuse is often not even recognized, not just by victims as abuse, but by counselors and the law enforcement as abuse.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your guess, out of curiosity, of what percentage of women who come to seek help for physical and emotional abuse didn't realize that they were under financial abuse as well?
I'd probably say 100%. Because I think sometimes financial abuse, the forms of financial abuse are maybe looked at again as things that can be proved, when actually that isn't all that financial abuse is. I mean, financial abuse is someone controlling you and controlling what you spend and what you have access to, and that's cash, assets and finances. And that is a much bigger thing than the actual physical thing of those things, controlling. So it's even being put under pressure in relation to money. So that's being put under pressure to spend your savings, save all your money and what you spend your money on. So just being put under pressure. So anyone that's in a domestic abuse relationship where they're totally controlled, I'm not sure many women would have say over what they spend and what they do with their money. So it is a huge form of coercion and control. Even someone refusing to contribute to household bills and expenses when you're living in the home together, that's a form of financial abuse.
Oh, absolutely. Because the deadbeat with the breadwinner, which was actually my situation for over 2 decades, is you have somebody who, when you have a deadbeat in your house and you're the reluctant or the coerced breadwinner, and they just never seem to have a job, what you don't realize they're doing is they're stealing half of your life every 30 days. They literally are, because first and foremost, before you can do a single thing for yourself, you have to cover the utility bill for their half. You have to cover the mortgage payment for their half. And you beat yourself up because you're like, well, you're the breadwinner. You could put a stop to it, which is why people in that position, victims in that position, rarely get much empathy from other people. They're like, well, you were the breadwinner. You could cut them off at any time. It's not that simple. And you can, especially if you're not told that something is abuse, you honestly can be convinced that it's not. It's just a relationship issue.
I think the thing is because people think about is what an abuser does do that is abuse, but it's also a lot in all forms of abuse of what an abuser doesn't do, especially in financial control.
Yeah, for sure. And to even recognize it.
If someone has completely controlled your money, that takes away every bit of your empowerment and your confidence. And if you're having to, it's exhausting. If someone is putting pressure on you or not doing something, it's absolutely exhausting. And when it's exhausting, you just go into survival mode. So every month you're in survival mode. Thought of leaving is too much to even consider. But in England, financial abuse is another thing that stands on its own as well. If there was no other forms of abuse, which there will be, but if there's no other forms of abuse, but you could prove financial abuse, that is a form of domestic abuse for us here in England. So it is recognised, but it's such a difficult thing because it's also about not allowing someone to make decisions on a household budget, not allowing them to have access to bank accounts, opening bank accounts in someone's name, buying goods in their name, setting up bills in their name, and then you've got loans or credit cards, you've got no obligation to pay them back.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so much cashing in pensions without permission. I mean, that could be a really unseen thing. Forcing you to change your will to whatever.
That's a good one, yeah.
Taking money for you, saying that, even just as small as taking money and saying, right, I'm going to go and buy dinner and buy an alcohol.
Yeah.
That is a full financial abuse. If you give someone money for a specific thing, even if it's for a pint of milk, they should be doing that with it. This is about family members as well, because there's a lot of parent-child abuse with this as well. A lot of financial abuse where children live with a parent and adult children live with a parent, and then or even younger children live with a parent and they take money and don't spend it on what they're supposed to and do all these sorts of things as well.
Well, plus we have these developing global problems. One of the ones I hear a lot is online gambling. And you talk about kids and young adults and even older adults living with their parents. Very often there is some type of thing like that. But your organization does a lot. Women's Aid, you said it's a charity, so it has to do a lot of fundraising since you are funded by the public. What does Women's Aid do to kind of spearhead charity events, and how do you stay funded?
So we are commissioned by our local authority, but that is just for the service. And because it's commissioned, we do get a certain amount of funding for them from local authority. And also the actual refuge spaces are funded by a housing benefit. And the housing benefit is slightly higher because we have staff in there, but that's it. So everything else we have to provide ourselves somehow or other. So we do lots of fundraising. We do bids to organisations that give money to charities and women's charities, specifically for domestic abuse, but often they're only for about 3 years. And there's for a specific project. So you can set up a project. It takes a while to set it up. And then before you know it, that funding's run out for that project. We do big fundraising campaigns. So at the moment, we've got one which is called the Big Give. That's going to be in October. So every pound that's raised is doubled. And so our target is 5,000. And we're calling this Memories in the Making, because what we want to do is use the money to provide activities for the children that are in refuge, because you need to remember that when women come to refuge, they often have to come with nothing. And when children come into refuge, they leave everything behind. They leave their friends, their school, their toys, often their clothes. And often for them, they've left a parent as well who they love, though he's a perpetrator. So we like to do activities like last week, we had a big beach trip. So we took the children and families and the other women that are staying in refuge out to the beach for the day, and they had a picnic on the beach. And for a lot of the women, they'd never even seen the sea.
Wow.
So that was amazing. Yeah. And there was a local art gallery that allowed us to go in there. So that was an experience that some of the women may or may not have had before. So that was really great. So it's doing things like that and paying for activities and paying, so we had the coach donated. So an organisation donated the coach for us for that activity. We've also got a campaign coming up called Raising Red, Flying Green. So I don't know if in America, but you're all about the red flags and the green flags around domestic abuse. Over here in England, we talk about the red flags. So there's signs that you're in a domestic abuse relationship. So for example, a red flag could be that you're not allowed to see your friends. Someone stops you seeing your friends. In a green flag, in a positive relationship, you're encouraged to do things on your own and with your friends because it's good for your well-being. So what we're doing is all around Luton in the town, we're having flags flown, and there'll be red flags with something that can be seen as a red flag to domestic abuse in a relationship, and then green flags to how it should be in a positive relationship. That is to get all sorts of communities within the local area to know whether that they can get support for domestic abuse or to recognise that they're in domestic abuse relationships. Previously, we've done a Home is Where the Heart Is campaign, which was renovations for one of our refuges, because though it's a temporary solution, at the time that the women come to refuge, they are a place of safety and it is their home. So we want to make it as homely as we possibly can. We've got donations from local organisations. We've had donations from a local football club, their fans. We've had donations from a local car manufacturer. We get donations from individuals. We use food banks. I don't know if you have food banks in America.
We do.
And then we have this other organisation called Crisis Aid, which they provide a lot of food banks for our women that from the Muslim community and the South Asian communities, that food's that's culturally appropriate. We've got a lovely organisation locally called the Mothers Union, which is a women's group, and they provide Easter eggs at Easter and Advent calendars, Christmas. So people come in and give us individual donations as well. So we get toiletries donated to us because obviously, as I've said, women often come with nothing. And when they come, it can take a while to sort up any income for them. So then we would need to provide them food and toiletries and things. So yeah, it's various ways. But we're always walking a tightrope here at Women's Aid.
Financially.
But when you see what we do, it's amazing what we do with very little money.
What do you do about pets, about women who leave who have a dog or a cat? Because I know that's another issue.
What we do is, so obviously pets are often used as a tool of abuse as well. So obviously and used as a thing to say, I'm not going to let you take the dog, or there's nowhere that you can take the dog. And obviously within the relationship, being violent and aggressive towards the dog, which is really heartbreaking for children as well. But we can't actually take dogs inside our refuge because a lot of our facilities are shared. So obviously around allergies, around pets. But we work with an amazing organisation called the Dogs Trust, and what they do is they foster pets. So for people that are going in domestic abuse refuges, homeless shelters, temporary accommodation who can't take pets, they have volunteers who take the pets in their own home for an amount of time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's really good. And they take dogs and cats and rabbits as well, I think. So it makes it easier for a child to leave, because imagine what a wrench that is.
Yeah, you have to leave your hamster or your turtle behind. I can see that as being incredibly traumatic.
There's a couple of organisations, but we use the Dogs Trust.
Where do you see your organization 12 months from now?
If you're giving me blue skies, here's blocks of housing where there's flats that are self-contained housing, and we can take as many women as possible in. At the moment, we have self-contained, and then that's a barrier for a few women, because if they've got older boys or bigger families, it's difficult for us to accommodate them. So, we're looking at always improving and adding to our accommodation. We would really love to build more specific accommodation, maybe for women that are blind or women that have got certain disabilities or elderly women, because there's a lot of older women are now realising that they're in domestic abuse relationships. So we'd like to support, and it may not be suitable for them to be in refuges with younger women. So we've been looking at some different models of that. What we'd really like to do is be self-funding, so have some sort of business that the women could work in and be able to support to fund the refuge ongoing, and for them to be able to work there and get references and build their confidence up. So we're looking at different things with that. Obviously, we've got financial constraints, but we're just applying to a lot of different organisations to see if they can support us with certain projects. We really want to build up our volunteer base as well. So there's a lot of volunteers with us. And obviously, working with volunteers, it's not just the volunteers coming in, it's also the fact that we need to supervise them, and you have to support those volunteers. So to be able to get staff in to support the volunteers. So literally anything that supports women. We really want to get health services coming into our head office that we've got now.
That's a big one, yeah.
Because we're a women-only space. So we've managed to make, the room I'm in now is actually a clinical room. So we've managed to make a clinical room with the hope of that being something that we can offer to the women, to have maybe sexual health services or other health services come in here and see them here. So yeah, we've always got plans. There's always more to do in this area.
Well, you have to be so outside the box all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you're always thinking, what can I do that's different? Because it is a crowded space, the nonprofit world. And I think what's so cool and unique about what you do is that you're trying to provide the highest level basic services for women in need, but you're also trying to provide some extras that I think make better quality, where you are doing little field trips, like you mentioned, going to a little museum, just taking these kids to the zoo for a day can be very life-changing in terms of, your mental attitude. You just have to always be thinking, though. You must feel like you're just always thinking of the next thing that we want to do or need to do. So it's probably even hard to say where you're going to be 12 months from now. Is this your life's work? Is this where you see yourself finishing your life's work professionally?
I can't imagine doing anything else. I've been in this field for so long. And also, I'm obviously getting older now, and I really want to share my experience with the next generation of women that are coming up to do this work, like what's worked and what hasn't, but also so that they can bring their new ideas, but also learn from the history of things as well. So I think that's really important. But I think I'll be doing this till the minute I go.
That's fantastic to know that. Most people sitting at their desk going, can't wait to get out of here.
When I walk my dog in the park, I'm still talking to people.
That's just a gift.
Well, some of the other stuff that I haven't mentioned that we do is absolutely amazing is we have a lot of people that come and do art projects with the women. So we've just had a ceramics course where the women have made all sorts of things out of ceramics, which have been absolutely amazing. The talent that we have in our refuge is that when there's any drawing or painting or sewing or anything, the talent we have in our refuge is outstanding. And also another thing is because we're so culturally diverse with our staff team and in the refuge, when we have anything get-togethers with women like to cook for each other, the food that we have here from every continent, and you can imagine, is amazing.
Well, I have two questions for you that I ask every guest. Question number one, what is your tip for someone listening right now who is under domestic abuse but hasn't been brave enough yet to take that first step to leave?
Okay, so what I would say to anybody in that situation is, I understand why you are finding it difficult to leave. There's so many layers to your domestic abuse, but just to tell you that there is organisations out there that can help you, and there is organisations like ourselves that are confidential and you can have that first conversation with. So look in your local area and see where there's particular women's services are that support women around domestic abuse, and just give them a call, because a lot of the women that speak to us, one of the things that abusers always say is no one will believe you. I will tell you now, on behalf of any organisation that works with women that have experienced domestic abuse, we do believe you and we know whatever you've experienced. So when you're ready, even if you just want to get the information to get ready, then call a service.
Great advice. And what's your tip for someone who is newly out of a domestic abuse relationship and is not sure what to do next to start to try to recover?
So my first advice would be very kind to yourself and not be too hard on yourself where you should be doing this or you should be doing that. You have a lot of recovery to do and you can do it. You've been strong enough to leave. So you are an amazing woman, an inspirational woman. But sometimes we're very hard on ourselves. And I always say that if your steps that you need to take, understand that it slowly and surely helps in your recovery. Everybody's journey is different.
Sure.
And everybody's experience is different. So don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes I say to women when they're telling me that they should be doing this or they should be doing this, I always say to them, if you were having this conversation with a friend, what would you tell them? You'd be a lot nicer than you are to yourself. So that's what I would say. Be kind to yourself and realise that it's a process and it is a journey, and you will feel differently as you move forward, and you will need to look after your inner self and your outer self as well. And you deserve to do that.
Absolutely. Really good advice. Claire, I am so happy to have had you on the show today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I hope you come back and keep in touch with us about everything that's going on in the UK. And you've been listening to Claire Holcombe. She is with the Women's Aid for Luton in the United Kingdom. And Claire, thank you again. I hope you come back.
Thank you, Laurie.
And you've been listening to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse.